Hi guys, welcome to the Law of Attraction podcast. I am here with Chris Curley for the beginning of the interviews, and Chris can tell you a little bit about himself. He is the dancing Buddha, and he can tell you a bit more about that himself. So Chris, tell us about you.
Well, I'll start with that name and where it originates from. So one of the things I do is dance. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I love it very dearly. Um, and the name Dancing Buddha, it sounds like claiming yourself to be a Buddha, like the Buddha, like the Sanskrit term for Buddha means like awakened one or enlightened one. Definitely don't think I'm enlightened. I haven't reached nirvana or anything like that, but I do follow Buddhism from the young age of 18, and it certainly awakened me. So there are Buddha qualities that I've been able to adopt because of these lessons, these teachings, and being able to apply these teachings to form my own wisdom. So that's where the Buddha comes from. It's just a play on awakened, to be awake. More so to myself, like I'm not awakened to anything no one else knows. Just awakened to my own personal wisdom. Um, and yeah, that came about after a year or a summer dancing in America. I was in Los Angeles for a summer, and the idea just came to me while I was meditating, and I was like, I gotta run with this title, you know. And that's all it is. That's all it is. It's a title. It's a brand almost, I guess you could say. I'm not necessarily attached to the name, but I like it. I like it. It's got like a ring to it. In terms of about me, obviously, if your listeners can't tell, I am not from these lands. I come from faraway lands where poets tears cure the sick. I am indeed, yes, for all my sins. Um, yeah, I was born in Ireland in a place called Kerry, way down south in the Republic, and it was a really wonderful place to grow up. I come from a little rural kind of town of about 2,000 people, I want to say. Um, and I grew up and I got it like a very traditional upbringing. So learned the language, played the music terribly, sang the songs worse, and danced the tunes. Okay, and yeah, I quickly became drawn to Irish dancing in particular because that's what I first knew. Um, but where I come from, that wasn't necessarily a cool thing to do. Being a young boy, and that's no fault of my environment or the people around me because uh, I will never play the victim. I will never say I was peer pressured into anything because at the end of the day, you have your power unless you disempower yourself. And at the end of the day, that is you're still making a choice.
Yeah.
So I like to take power. I like to take responsibility, even if things like I've changed my wording now. I think your language is so important. I don't look at things that happen to me. I look at things happen for me. And when you have that mentality, the whole world just opens up. You know, you're working out of abundance rather than lack.
Oh, you're speaking my language, man. You're brilliant. This is
yeah. Already coming in hot. And yeah, but I gave in. I gave in to what I thought I should be. So I kind of told my friends, you know, that I like wanted to do what they were doing, which was like Gaelic football, boxing, and other sports. And I remember the conversation having with my mother because I did Irish dancing from the age of about 4 or 5 till I was 12. So in primary school. Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't on that level, but that was my first taste of dance, and I absolutely loved it. But I pretended like I didn't as much as I did. Yeah, it's really cool. I'm very proud of that heritage and proud of that lineage. You know, that's one of the things that has come out of Ireland. Um, but yeah, I felt like that wasn't who I should be. Like even though I was gravitating towards that, I felt like I needed to deny that part of myself. Um, and so I remember talking to my mother and saying to her, I was like, "Listen, mom, I gotta give up this dancing shit." Excuse my language. And my friends were there at the time, and they were kind of like Joe listening in or whatever. My mom was like, "Are you sure? Like Joe, you seem to enjoy this." And I was like, yeah, I'm sure I want to go play Gaelic football and box and do all these sporty things. And I did, and I was very good at those things. I was like captain of my sports team. I was a very good boxer. But I was like, I was miserable doing them. And I was like, I think it's good to be competitive, but I was like competitive to a level where it was like it was toxic. I was quite arrogant. Like I would be that type of player that would be talking shit in their opponent's ear, like really like trying to get to them, like Joe. And that's not me. That like today, that like Joe, I look at that and it's like an alien of myself. But it was because I wasn't happy with myself, and I projected that outwardly into my opponents, and I would be nasty to them, and I would start fights. I would start fights playing sports, like as a young kid, and it wasn't good. But it was because I was living someone else's role, the
Yeah.
role I thought I had to play, um,
And for people who
and I did that up until
absolute antithesis of what he is now, very gentle man.
No, I'm probably more capable now. I'm probably more deadly, but I don't tend to use those out of a control setting.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I'm much more peaceful now.
Yeah, I think when you get kind of stuck into things, it sounds like what you kind of there's a split in life where you choose kind of, and I hesitate to say the spiritual path and the ego path, but there's a very big split between what heals your soul and what takes you further away from it. You know, and the things that are kind of centered in the ego, like the materialism of the world and the kind of egotistical things about kind of the way that we look and vanity and like Instagram life. There's this kind of like path that takes you away from and closer to, and it feels like at one point you were kind of going closer to, and then you split your life. You thought, actually, what else to do? And you started going towards the egocentric thing. And obviously, when you live from the ego, it's a very sort of dangerous path to take, because, like what you're saying, you get further and further away from that which actually makes you feel happy and fulfilled. But the ego is very fragile. It's very narcissistic. It's about, you know, what impact can you make on other people rather than what impact can you do for yourself and for the world. And like you say about with the Buddha, you know, it's not about this kind of I am enlightened to be other people's gurus. It's to I am enlightened to be my own guru. And that's the kind of like me, I think that's very much the difference between kind of religion and spirituality as well, which I don't know whether you find that coming from Ireland. Obviously, very kind of religious background in Ireland, and I grew up very religious. But I find the difference between kind of religion, where you're having when you're attempting to have like a spiritual experience, but you're doing it through a human being. It's like people talk to God through their priest, they talk to God through their reverend, they talk to God through their imam, through their pastor. But that's not the way to God. You know, the way to God is through conversation with yourself, because enlightenment is internal, not external. And I feel like it's interesting from it's very kind of like very clear, these two paths for you from my perspective, because of the pathways that you've taken, coming from a very religious background, coming from feeling like you want to do the things that kind of resonate with your soul, and then being kind of a young man that has got you know, the perspectives of society put on, and that, oh, actually I don't want to do this dancing that I don't feel is cool enough, I kind of want to go and be a boxer and do what my other friends are doing. And actually, when you've made that choice, you've split to kind of the thing that hasn't fulfilled you. And I don't see, you know, you've always been like, I mean, when I met you, I was absolutely just in love with you from the second I met you. I was just like, who is this guy? Where has he come from? Just like so on the same like wavelength. Our conversations are always fantastic whenever I meet you, and like I never get to spend enough time with you. I always find it just like I just want more of you in my life.
You know what? That's very kind of you to say, and I feel the same. I feel like Joe, our conversation are very. What's that?
I have to say that I'm being videoed.
No, like I feel like our conversations are very uplifting. You know what I mean? Like I always come away from them feeling light and charged, and that's what I love. Like there's certain individuals you meet, right? And there's certain people that are energetic vampires that drain you of your energy, and those are the complainers, the whiners, the moaners, that literally look at their outside, their external, and they think, oh, that's not right. So like this is going to affect me, and then they try to bring you down. But then there are certain individuals like yourself that are empowered, that are taking back their power, and you speak to them, and it's like it's energy for the soul, you know. Like, oh, we eat and we listen and we hear and we see, but like when we're having these conversations, you almost get like a natural high from them. Like
Yeah.
the only comparison I can make is like from after that gleam you feel after meditating, or when you exercise, or when you breathe deeply, or there's all these different methods and tools that we can do. But a conversation with someone, spending some time with someone, that is also a natural high, because again, like we're very social creatures. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I worry about what's going on in the lockdown because obviously, people are being kind of put into these little bubbles, and like you say, we're energy sharers. You've got people in your
mm,
life that are hopefully kind of really uplifting. We've all got in our lives like the energy vampires that kind of suck the life out of us. And by the time we finish, we're like, God, I wish I hadn't spoken to that person.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But sometimes you can't kind of in kindness or whatever, we keep them in our lives, but and hope that I would say to my clients, like, honey, don't go down and meet them, make them come up and meet us.
Uh,
It's not always.
do you know what though? They're there for a reason. They're there to teach you something, because again, it's a test. Like, I was speaking to a friend of mine about this the other day. Like, you could go away into a cave and completely seclude yourself and isolate yourself. Sorry, that's probably a trigger word now. Take yourself away from society and meditate and find all these wisdoms. But if you do not apply that, if you do not put that into practice amongst your peers and people around you, like, it's not worth anything. And that's what people do. People test you on
Yeah,
a regular basis. People challenge you, and whether they are energetic vampires or people that are draining or whatever, like, they're there for a reason. And if you are irritated by every rub, how will you be polished? You know, your response to these individuals is what's key. Like, because at the end of the day, like, you either engage with them or you just observe it. You know, like, you do not have to react. Like, that's something I've learned. Like, Joe, I would have been very reactive like my entire life up until about the age of, I'd say 20. Like, when, because I left Ireland when I was 18 to come here to study, and like 18 was the age I found Buddhism. And the reason why I found it was well, to touch on what you said about religion, you alluded to it earlier. I was brought up Catholic, not really strict Catholic, but Catholicism was everywhere in Ireland. It was in the schools, it was in the fucking the government. Obviously, it was in church. It was everywhere. It was insidious, you know. And don't worry, I have nothing against. Well, I do have something against Catholic Church, but I've nothing against religion. Like, I've nothing against the tool of religion. I'm grateful religion exists, because it brings a lot of peace to people. It brings meaning to people's lives. And because without it, I think a lot of people will be wandering lost. But the Catholic Church as a system, like, there's a lot of issues there. That's a whole nother podcast, you know what I mean? But growing up in that culture, there was a lot of repression. Like, pushing down, like, sexual education, for example, is like basically non-existent in Ireland. Like, you have to learn through your own means. So that was my religion growing up. I'd say, like, not anything against my parents or anything, but you're indoctrinated into that almost, like, as a young child in Ireland. Like, you're expected to follow that and go to church and be religious, whatever. But it wasn't until I was 18 and I was experiencing severe depression, and I was really suicidal, and or from the age of 16, I should say, and I had this like hopelessness and low self worth, and just like feelings and thoughts that I was just the worst person in the world, and I started looking on the internet for some answers or solutions, and I didn't find any. I just found more. I just found tools and more questions, and Buddhism was what I found. And I wouldn't say like necessarily Buddhism saved me or anything, because at the end of the day, you got to save yourself. Nothing, like, there's nothing that's going to give you the answer that's outside of yourself. But Buddhism was like, oh, these are some of our teachings, these are some of our practices. Try them and like see how it is for yourself, because that's what it is. Like, it's not even technically your religion, because it doesn't have a deity per se. There is no God. There was just a guy who became enlightened, and he started teaching people. And he was like, even in some of the scriptures, he says, like, seek it out within yourself, like, find out how this sits with you. Don't just take our word for it. Don't just follow the dogma, or if there is any dogma, like, realize it for yourself, which I like, because it was very personal then. it was very subjective to your experience, which I think spirituality is, like you just mentioned earlier. And there was one teaching in particular, the teaching of impermanence, essentially that nothing lasts. And some people kind of conflated the Buddha with being a nihilist, because one of his truths, the first thing he said to people was life is suffering, which is a very loose translation. That the real translation is life is unsatisfactoriness, which essentially means that like suffering is present, um, but that there is a way out of suffering. Those were the following truths, and then the noble eightfold path is how you find your own way out of suffering. And like same with impermanence, to say that like nothing lasts, that's a very scary idea, and it's a very not a very romantic idea. Like, Joe, if you enter into a relationship and you're like saying to the person you're with, like, uh, this is impermanent, much like anything, that's not the thing to say, is it? Do you know what I mean? But like at a base, like when you have that base principle that nothing lasts, it makes you more appreciative and grateful for what you do have, because you understand that you're mortal. You know what I mean? That you will eventually die, as will all your loved ones. And that's not saying it in like a negative way or a pessimistic way. That is just reality. We have to be firmly rooted in the practicality, but our mind, our spirit, our heart can be in the metaphysical. You know, we create that, but we have to recognize our own physical limitations, because they actually can teach us a lot, you know. And that impermanence, that teaching of impermanence, while I was experiencing depression, knowing that this will not last, this is not forever, but I was clinging on to it. You know, they talk about clinging and aversion. I was clinging on to the bad times. I was clinging on to the depression, like as if it was me. I was attached to that identity when it wasn't who I was. You know, when people say I am depressed or I am sad, that's attachment right there. Your words, you like your mind doesn't even know like the difference when you're attaching to these things. It's taking that at face value. It's taking yourself at face value, rather than saying that you are those things. Just say you're feeling those things, you're experiencing those things, because you're not the thoughts themselves, you're not the feelings themselves, you're the thinker of those thoughts, you're the feeler of those feelings. And once I was able to create that gap from meditating and like following these principles and these teachings, it that saved my life. And I remember this one particular occasion, because I came over, this is what it was, like I was like running away from myself. I thought depression was something I could outrun. I, again, going back to it, I thought it was external. I thought it was my environment. I thought, I grew up in this really repressed area, like in a Catholic kind of upbringing. I was like, oh, that's the reason why I'm feeling shit or depressed. And then I went to Wales, and I was experiencing it there. I was feeling depressed and suicidal, and I was like, "God, it's where I am. It's too stressful, Joe. It's like studying university stuff." And then I went to Canada, and I went to see my sister, and I was in this beautiful place, and I started feeling it again. And like I remember, like going into my cabin on my break, I was sharing with four other guys, and this was the only time I'd be alone in there, and crying to myself, like sobbing to myself, thinking that I was so worthless, and I wasn't like fit to be alive, or that I should have this life, you know. And I was contemplating and thinking about how I was going to kill myself. Like that's how bad it was. And it wasn't until my sister walked in on one of these lunchtime tear sessions that she saw behind a curtain, because up until that point, like I don't know, like I feel like people with these mental health issues can be the greatest actors, because you can put on a good front and pretend like you're good to the world, but at the end of the day, when you're alone by yourself or you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you can't lie to that person. You cannot lie to yourself. You have to eventually sit and be alone with that person. And my sister got a glimpse of that, and she was like, "Chris, what's going on?" And I was thinking, am I going to continue lying to this person that I love, or am I going to just be honest? And I said to her, I said, I'm not feeling okay. And then, ironically, I mean, maybe it's not that ironic, but I think it's ironic. She brought me down to the lake that I was going to drown myself in. And I couldn't help but have a weird smile on my face. I was like, you can't even write this shit, you know? And she was like, oh, Chris, let's go out in the water on these paddle boards. And I was like, are you sure about that? And she was like, yeah, let's go have a chat. And we went out there, and I told her, I was like, listen, like, I can't get away from this thing. It follows me everywhere I go. It just seems to be present in every place that I visit. And she was like, Chris, it's not where you are, it's within you, it's who you are, you know? And when I initially heard that, it was like a knife to the gut, because it was like, what? So I can't get away from this thing? But she said, no, you can solve this thing. You can resolve it, because if it's within you, you have control over it. You can do something about it. And like I was like, wow, that's so true.
Yeah.
And that was a turning point for me to take back power and be like, oh, if this is something that's starting within myself and it's not outside of me, I can work with this. And then ever since that, it's just been gotten better and better, because it's like the depression doesn't go away. Like there are ways to manage it and whatnot, but it still comes back as strong as it came day one. You just become stronger. You just become better, you know. And some days it'll catch you. Some days it'll catch you slipping. You know what I mean? Your house might be a bit rickety, and the wind outside is about to knock it down. But as long as you pick yourself back up, like I had one of those like a week ago. I was feeling it, and I just felt it, and then I let it go. I remember having a conversation, saying to my friend like that the past week I wasn't feeling right, and then I said to him, I was like, listen, I'm gonna leave this right here. I'm gonna leave this right here in this conversation, and the rest of my day is gonna be amazing, because I choose for it to be amazing. I felt what I felt. It has taught me some lessons, but it stays right here, you know, and it's not gonna affect me no more.
I think that we live in a culture at the moment where a lot of people are victims, and when you have that stance, it kind of takes away your power to be able to change things. I mean, like I think all the best people that I know that have kind of gone through this path of like spiritual ascension and awareness in their life have all suffered, and they've suffered greatly. I mean, I came to the path of kind of enlightenment or spiritual ascension or whatever learning, the same sort of thing. 15, wanted to commit suicide, and I'd lived a long time being very, very, very depressed, self-harming, not able to kind of even survive on a daily basis, just like that feeling, like you say, I am depressed and the life is never going to get any better. And I think in those moments when people commit suicide, it's because they don't see that suicide is a final solution to a temporary problem. And when you're in
Oh
that
yeah.
depression, it feels like nothing's ever going to get better. But things do get better. And I wish I could kind of go back. I mean, even if I'd gone back in a time machine and said to my 15-year-old self, don't worry, you're going to be happy sometime, I'd be like, fuck off. That is not going to happen. Get
You wouldn't
lost.
want to hear it, would you?
You know what I mean? Whoever the hell you think you are with my face on, it's not happening. But I think it is that kind of like, the practicing of non-attachment. I mean, I started with kind of meditation and witchcraft, oddly, which is all kind of like, which, quite good roots in Ireland, for kind of paganism and that. So there's a lot of kind of that ethereal nature magic that goes on in Ireland, certainly, that was kind of really quashed by the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
but, I mean,
We were doing all right.
yeah.
We were doing all right until St. Patrick came over and fucking brought religion. You know what I mean? We were worshiping the sun, the moon, the stars, having a blast.
I mean,
It's like, why are these people smearing mud all over themselves and dancing naked around the fire?
it's the best nights I've ever had, I gotta say. I think that is it. It's like where the dogma comes in, and I think the problem with religion is that it takes your power away from you. It's that, and a lot of people, I mean, I've got my partner's kind of agnostic atheist, and that's quite difficult to deal with sometimes, because I'm literally somebody that channels from source. So it's like, saying I'm a nut job, like like but it's a case that, like, when you meet people who are kind of so dogmatic about stuff, actually it's always like, my pastor can save me, God can save me. And that's not, like you say with the Buddha. I think that if you look at the Bible and Jesus is just like Buddha, but it's been missed. Where he says, it's like, the kingdom of God is within you. And he's talking about that happiness and joy comes from within. And he said that we're all children of God. And what he's talking about is that we can all be prophets. We can all be the Messiah, because when you connect to that innate nature of the source that is within you and yourself, whether you want to call it your higher self, your spiritual ascended mind, or whatever, when we can all connect to that, we've all got access to these great, wise, sagely understandings of the world, and this knowing that can heal everybody. But I think a lot of people just kind of hear that sort of stuff, and maybe it's a from kind of like very low self-esteem, which everybody on this planet suffers from low
Yeah.
self-esteem. Like very few people love themselves truly. It's the human
Mm.
condition. But I think when you say to somebody you can be your own messiah, they not only do they fear that that's very kind of narcissistic and arrogant and egotistical, it also kind of plays into that thing where they think, oh, I'm not that good, I'm not that good. But yeah, you are your own messiah, you are your own prophet, you are your own guru. And if people take time to like understand that, like with the observer, in Buddhist meditation, when you think, you sit and you meditate and you just observe, and it's like you see the thoughts and you hear the thoughts and you're like, who's having these thoughts? You do the process of becoming the observer, and actually what you recognize is that the thoughts that you have don't make you any more what you think you are. I say to I do
Yeah.
my workshops with my clients, and one of the ones I always do is like, they're always like, well, I think I'm a bad person. I'm like, well, think you're a unicorn for me, will you? And they're like, what? And they're like, well, you're thinking you're a unicorn. Presumably you're a unicorn now. And they're like, no, that's just stupid. And I'm like, so which thoughts are you choosing to be thoughts that are real? And which thoughts are you choosing to not be real? Because they're all just thoughts. It's just
Yeah.
that you are, paying something into certain thoughts because you're believing them. But that's all it is. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
And a belief is just a thought that you've repeated enough to become a habit. And this is things like depression and things. I think depression is like an ending cycle of negativity.
Mm.
And it's like you start a negative thought and it's a spiral down, and they gather momentum. It gets energy, and then before you know it, you're depressed and it's really difficult to get out of. And that's kind of like, you if you stick one toe in the water, you're more likely to fall in. So it's like try not to
Yeah.
do the negative thoughts at all. I think practicing kind of positivity without that kind of toxic positivity, because I think we've
Mm.
got also this kind of movement where people are kind of going into toxic positivity, where they're just like, everything's good, everything's good, everything's fine, it's not talk about anything bad. And I kind of got into that because I was a bit fearful of like, I don't want to slip back into being this negative cow that just moans all the time. So it was like, I can remember my partner broke up with me like a couple of years ago. This probably was about one time I met you. And I didn't even tell anybody. I was like, no, not going to talk about that. That's negative.
Wow.
Like, didn't even talk about it. I went home, had conversations with friends. Everybody was like asking me, how's your boyfriend? How's he? And I'm like, yeah, everything's great. Everything's fine. Just
Oh my God.
imagine this complete, like, no, not even talking about that. Because from my perspective, I practice law of attraction. And I was like, I'm not acknowledging that. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, that's not the world I want to live in. Like, we're still together,
Yeah.
it's going to be fine, so I'm not going to acknowledge it. And like crazy. And the humorous thing is, I have manifested it. Like, he's come back twice in the last 2 years at the most inopportune moments of being like, I still love you. And you're like, oh, fuck. It's too late now. So you got to be
It's like you
careful.
can't switch off the law of attraction when you want to. It's like, goddamn.
Like, the universe doesn't necessarily give you what you want, but it'll always give you what you need, And I think
Yeah.
the times that the lessons come are always perfect timing. This thing of like the cycle about like, things that you need in your life will appear when you need them. And
Mm.
when you needed Buddhism, when I needed like meditation, when you need the perfect thing to arrive, that person will come. And I've always found it with my clients, like a lot of my clients are mirrors for things that I'm tweaking, So
Yeah.
they'll come and they'll talk to me about a problem that I'm having, and I'm like, holy shit, this universe has got some real magical juju going on, man, because it's like
Yeah.
such a level of it's so defined and so I mean, it's literally like you're living in a video game. It's just perfect at the perfect moment. It's like you're about to die, and then you find a medipack. In like in like a role play game or something, and it's like it's so synchronistic and so perfect that I don't know, as somebody who's spiritual, how people can kind of look around and just see chaos, because I don't see chaos. I mean, yeah, there's lots of chaos, but it's like organized chaos, and everything is
Mm.
happening for a reason. And I find that people that don't see that, I'm like, what the hell are you looking at? I mean, do you find that the experiences and the people that have been brought into your life have always been perfect and has always taught you what you've needed? Does the universe look after you in that way?
Most definitely. Yeah. Like to your point there, you can look at a lot, like, because like the external, like Joe, we do create our own internal reality, but like what's outside of us, like we're all seeing it, right? But it's through a different lens of perspective. So it's like you may be looking at something, but you truly do not see it. You do not see like the beauty that is there because you're not looking for it. You know what I mean? You're just seeing the world's so dull and great. Like for example, yesterday, like people, I was working and I was in town and it was raining. It was raining really quite heavily, and people were coming up to me labeling the day, saying it's a miserable day, and I was like, how? How's it a miserable day? It's like, oh, because it's raining. I was like, that doesn't make it a miserable day. There needs to be rain. I said, if you weren't able to feel the rain in your skin, you wouldn't be able to feel the sun in your skin. You know what I mean? You need one for the other.
Yeah,
Like, be grateful that you can feel it. You know, and obviously, I'm not one of these people being like, "You so much to be grateful for it," and I'm like, Joe, trying to ram it down their throat because you don't want to be that guy, do you? But it's just like a gentle way, just speaking from my own experience. Like, I remember I had a realization there about 5 years ago. I was walking to work. It was like a 25-minute walk. Halfway there, started pouring down torrential rain. I'll get back to your question as well. I haven't forgot. It started pouring down torrential rain, and I was like, well, if I run to work now, I'm gonna get drenched. Like, there's no way around this. I'm gonna get wet regardless. So I just kind of stood in it. And this is by a main road as well, by the prison, like on that main road there here in Cardiff. And I was like by the traffic lights, and I just had my hands open towards the sky, and I was like feeling the rain on my skin, and I was just overwhelmed by this gratitude for the sensation of touch that I could feel this. Because if I couldn't feel this, I wouldn't be able to feel the sun on my skin, like a friend's hug, a lover's touch. Like, there's so many things I would not be able to feel if I couldn't feel this. So I was just overwhelmed by immense gratitude in that moment. And ever since then, I love the rain. I think it's wonderful. Honestly, it's a weird one. Like, as soon as you go back to believing something or labeling something or judging something in your mind is made up then. Whereas if you keep your mind open and you look at things with a lens of optimism, you're better served that way. But in regards to your question about friends coming at the certain times or the universe looking after me, yeah, absolutely. People have come into my life at times when I didn't think I needed them, but I did. And it wasn't until time had passed and I could reflect on it that it taught me a lot. Like, I've had friends like crying on my couch, talk to me about certain things they were going through, and it was something I was in denial about, but I was helping them through it. But in a way, they were helping me,
Yeah.
even though on the surface it looked like I was helping them.
Yeah.
They brought, but they brought what I was feeling up to the surface. Yeah. It is, yeah, man. Like, everyone's a teacher, whether they realize it or not, whether they're conscious of it or not. I remember some guy said that to me the last day I was at this camp in Canada. I think he gave me some weed for some reason. He opened up this box, and before he gave me this weed, he was like, "Every day's a school day, my brother." And it just stuck with me. I don't even remember who the guy was, but that line just stuck with me. And like, he was probably just saying it to say it, like, Joe, like a throw off, but like it resonated like deeply, deeply with me. And I was just like, wow, yeah, there's teachers everywhere. And like, Joe, I'm a student. I'm always a student, like, of everything, of life. Whatever it is that I do, like, I'm always learning, and people are always teaching, whether they realize they're not, or testing or challenging.
Like, I had that situation when you said earlier that you were crying and your sister came in. You're like, what do I do? What do I do? And I can remember I used to be a proper little psytrance raver. I used to go to like illegal parties, like
Nice.
all across Wales and
Not surprised.
I know. You wouldn't look it with the jacket on these days, but it's all just but like and I can
Like
remember I
half of
was
me.
at this rave and yeah, I think I'd sort of taken some acid and was talking to this guy, and there was like always this sort of really perfect opportunities to kind of have really deep conversations at raves, which is the antithesis of what culture and society would think they would be. People are like, oh, free parties, it's all evil people doing bad stuff, and it's like, actually a lot of the time it's just very spiritual people that want to go and dance in the woods, and it's that kind of
Yeah.
paganism where it's people are saying it's wrong. But I can remember I'd kind of gotten into one of these really kind of deep, kind of miserable conversations, because up until that point I didn't really have the confidence to sort of talk to people about how I was feeling. So it would slowly kind of leach out at points, when I was if I was drunk, or if I'd taken some drugs or something, then things start to leach out, because you have like either a different, you're in a different mind state. So, and I had so much pain that I was carrying. But I can remember kind of this time I was having this conversation with this chap, and he said to me, "You are your own problem. You are your own solution." And I was like, "You fucking bastard!" It was like an absolute knife in my heart, because I just told him, I was like, I've been abused, I've had this happen, that happen. And then when you say to somebody like, all of these people have treated me bad, and I've been bullied, and I've been attacked, and all that sort of stuff, and then you say that, and then somebody goes, "It's your fault, love." Like, I was like, what the hell, man? Did you not hear what I just said? Like real victim mentality going on. Like, I did a podcast about the crown of victim mentality, like your crown of victim, and a lot of victims are really like attached to their story. Like you say, I am depressed, I am abused, I am this, it becomes like this crown that they walk around wearing. And I think that in society, a lot of people are doing that, at the moment. It's like this whole offense culture. Well, I'm offended by that. Well, why are you offended by that? You're offended by it because you're triggered by it, because you haven't fixed it, you haven't dealt with it, or you're giving your power away to somebody else. And then trying to make them change by saying like, "Oh, I want to edit your language," or "I want to stop your behavior," or "I want you to not be allowed in my safe space." I mean, it's ridiculous. It's going to end up with loads of people who are incompetent at healing themselves and actually at ever growing as a human being spiritually, because you're expecting for the government to legislate, you're expecting for somebody else to change their behavior before you can level up. And that, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. I grew up in a home that was really quite damaging. And, if I had said, "Oh, I'm just going to wait for my parents to change," I'd still be waiting now. I'd still be suffering from depression. I'd still be suffering from anxiety. I'd still be self-harming. I probably wouldn't be here. I probably would have thrown myself off a bridge long before now. And, this kind of idea, when somebody said to me, "You are your own problem, you are your own solution," it really cut deep. But it's so true, because it was like, nobody else can heal me. And it was the same sort of, the same sort of thought that you had. It's like, nobody else can heal you. Your wound is internal, and you have to sort it out. I think we live in a society with kind of like, if you look at kind of selfie culture and Instagram, I've just deleted Instagram. I can't even be on it anymore. The only thing I use it for is now is my business, but I've deleted my personal one, because I'm just this heavy feeling of so many broken people desperate for somebody else to fill them up with self-esteem and love and anything. And it's like, and you see it, and it's actually so tragic. Like, I kind of got into it, but now I've kind of gone through, over lockdown, I think there's been a huge shift in global spiritual awareness. I don't know whether you felt this, but certainly over the last few months, there's been mass changes in a lot of people, and there's been a spiritual awakening for a lot of people who weren't on the path that you and I are on, that are actually recognizing a lot of their behaviors are detrimental, and they want to move away from some of those detrimental things. And it's been something that's been a consciousness shift in a large group of people, which has been really interesting. But like, when you look at things like Facebook, and selfie culture, and like all these like beautiful, fantastic, wonderful people who have got amazing souls, and they're putting pictures of themselves up, and in some desperation that somebody will tell them that they look beautiful, or that somebody will like their picture, or that some guy will comment because they want to have sex with them, or vice versa. And it's like, how vacuous is that? It's like, it's this kind of instant gratification where you're, again, outsourcing your healing to somebody in the hope that it will work, but it's always a band-aid on a massive gaping wound. And it's like, you need to suture yourself. It's like what you were going through with depression, what I was going through with depression. I've had people come and try to help me, but nobody really could do it for me. Nobody could really help me. It had to come from within. And I think a lot of our culture at the moment is set up to distract people from doing that healing. It's all distractions of like, frilly new, I call it new shiny new ball syndrome. They see something and it's like, oh, shiny new ball, and they go after it. And actually it's all just distractions from the actual path, which is, healing and about spending time with yourself and sitting in silence. I mean, how much silence is there? Podcasts, videos, YouTube, TV, music, everything. It's just people are constantly consuming. But when you're constantly in a state of consuming, it's like you're never in a state of creativity. So, those moments when you're silent and in meditation, it's actually those moments that you can hear the source, that you can hear your higher self, and that you can hear the remedy. That you can hear the what you need in your life. Do you find that? Do you have, like, when you meditate, do you get in contact with, like, what I would describe as source, or like your higher self? Have you got that kind of innate? Do you know what I mean? You can hear something just goes
Yeah.
like, you know what you need to do, blah, 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 and it's like, holy shit, where's that wisdom come from? And it's like, yeah, no, that is the thing I need to do. Do you have that when you meditate?
Yeah, it's like you're opening up a channel, and there's different terms for it, isn't there? Like, some people say God, cosmic energy, source. I like source. I quite like that. I've never heard that before, but I like it. But yeah, you feel as though you're tapping into some higher power, and it's almost like it's expressing itself through you. Because sometimes I just feel like I'm a medium. I feel like I'm just a medium through which the universe or this cosmic energy is expressing itself, and that's why I try not to take credit for things, because I'm like, I'm just a vessel here, you know what I mean? There's something else at play. That's why, like, I don't think when we die physically that's the end, because I'm not just this body. I'm not what I appear to be. I'm much more than that. Like, I'm not just my personality, because that can change. That's very malleable. I'm something more than that. My spirit isn't something that can be contained, although it is currently residing in this physical body, in this vessel. I know I'm much more than that, or it's a different experience.
No,
But yeah, when I meditate, I feel very much closer to that, to the higher power, and it shows me the path. It tells me what I need to know and what I should do. Um, yeah, meditation honestly gives you superpowers, like, fully. Like, if I could tell anyone now, if they wanted to hear the best tool that you can do, meditation. It's so simple, but it's so powerful and so effective. And, like, the amount of things that I have dropped, like, and gained from it is just, it's endless. Like, the one in particular is that gap it creates between reactivity and responsiveness.
yeah,
Because all the time I would suffer from second dart syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's where something happens, or you have a thought or a feeling, and that's the first dart, and the second dart is what you do. So you can throw that second dart and react to that feeling or that event, or that thought, or you can hold the dart back and respond, or just let it pass. You know what I mean? Because some of these feelings and some of these thoughts, they come, like, Joe. That is the nature of the train of thought. It passes through, and you don't really have any control of that initial feeling, that initial thought. But what you do have control over is your response to that. Like, say, jealousy, for example. Like, I feel like we've all experienced jealousy to one degree or another, and that doesn't make you any less of a person. But what you do with that feeling is important. If you if you start, like, acting like, and start taking their phone and, like, going through all their shit, and, like, Joe, like, acting in a way out of jealousy, then that's the real issue. The feeling of jealousy isn't the issue. That's a teacher. That feeling is showing you something. It's showing that maybe you're insecure, maybe you don't trust your partner or whatever. Like, but how you deal with that, how you respond to that, is the most important thing. The feeling itself, it's not a bad feeling. There are no bad feelings or good feelings. There are no bad or good people either. Like, we're just people. They're just feelings. They're neutral. These labels we put on these things, that's the real issue. When you say this is a bad feeling or this is a good feeling, it's just a feeling. Like, what you do with it, how you use it, is the important thing. Similar to, like, Joe, on a grander scale, like, when people say, oh, they're a good person or they're a bad person, I think that takes away credit. If you just say, oh, they're just a good person, this shit ain't innate. This isn't innate to me. Like, this is a choice. And it's like, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes I have urges to do some bad shit. I get notions, but I don't do them. You know, I choose to do good. Sometimes I just want to crack someone with my shin onto their skull, but I refrain. I have self control. I guard that. You know what I mean? Like if I was just going around responding and like falling into my urges, I'd be doing some pretty bad shit. But I refrain from that, and that's what it is. At the end of the day, every day we wake up and we make choices, and we either choose to do quote unquote good or quote unquote bad. But it's perspective. It's all neutral.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, you know. And I always sort of think about like weeds, you know. If you're
Yeah.
if you're a potato farmer and you get a beautiful rose plant in the middle of your crop, you're like, this bloody rose, it's a weed. I've got to dig it up. And then vice versa. If you're a rose gardener and you just want a beautiful flower garden, and then suddenly you get this gross potato plant in the middle of your things, it's a weed. All it is the connotations that we put on things, you know. And I studied neuro-linguistic programming, which is literally that what you say programs your mind, you know. And it can be as easy as turning your language on its head. You know, I did a workshop for my clients about about lockdown and quarantine and the language that people were using and are using about things like social distancing and all these kind of very, very negative language, you know. The language that the government have chosen to use during this time is really detrimental to people's mental health, you know. And it's about an act of control, you know, about kind of how obedient can you be rather than actually you're doing something for the good of people. And I know like a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people on the planet at the moment don't kind of get up and are aware that they can choose to be good and they can choose to be bad because they're living in a state of reactivity. And so it's somebody else's fault that they behave that way. You know, they get up and they go, yeah, but if that person hadn't attacked me, I wouldn't have punched him in the face.
Yeah.
Well, you know, nobody can make you do anything. It's you choose to do it. And yeah, it's fucking hard. I mean, see me driving. I get road rage like a bastard. I mean, I used to ride a motorbike. So like if you want to learn to be a good driver, get a motorbike because everybody on this planet is an asshole that's trying to kill you when you're on your bike. But then so now I'm really reactive, like. But then I watch myself sometimes, and I'm like, look at this dickhead, look at that person, look at that. I'm really like aggressive about people, and I'm like, I get out of the car and I'm like, shit, like I've just completely sunk right down into my
just see yourself in a reflection. You're like,
it's this idea that like I'm following the rules and why aren't you following the rules? And I think that that's like exactly what's going on at the moment with quarantine and lockdown, where people are like, I'm wearing a mask, why aren't you wearing a mask? Or get 2 meters away. And it's just like people have become so reactive at the moment. And obviously it comes in a state of fear. You know, when you're in road rage is so intense because you're frightened that your life is going to be taken. You might be in an accident. And obviously people have been kind of amped up into a state of fear. But fear is just another emotion and you can control it, and it doesn't have to be something that you react to, and you can talk yourself off that precipice. And I think that when people start to take, you know, meditation is such a key to opening up that opportunity to have those conversations with yourself and to do it in a way that you can become a conscious creator in your life as opposed to somebody that's just reactive, you know. And I think that if you're a reactive person, you're not really much better than an animal. You know, you're not really doing much better than an animal. You're just kind of living in your environment and you're just responding to your environment, you know. And that's, I think, the whole beauty of being a human being is that we have that awareness of being able to choose a different path. I think that animals are a lot more mindful in the moment. I don't think that I think they're sentient. Don't get me wrong, I'm like vegetarian, don't eat them, don't hurt them. You know, I'm very much, we're all the same souls, just in different coats, you know. But I think that, you know, I think human beings have got that ability to throw ourselves into the future and into the past, whereas I don't think that animals have that. I think that animals are it's just now. They're just now, you know.
primal.
Yeah, it's just very kind of in the moment and mindful, which is why their energies are very much higher than ours most of the time. But I think that the beauty of being able to throw yourself into the future and throw yourself into the past is the opportunity to learn from your own behavior. Whereas actually what a lot of people use this superpower that humans have got to become depressed about what has happened previously and to become anxious about what might come. But when you're doing that again, you're not recognizing your your sovereign power to be able to change the future and to be able to change what you've done in the past. If you've failed or you've had something happen to you in the past, if you turn it into a lesson, is it a failure? I think it's a success. I've done some terrible things in my past, but like really bad things that I'm not proud of and I would never want to do again. And that I wouldn't even talk about on camera because I'm so ashamed of what I've done in the past. But like in those moments, I have decided that I will be better than that. Whereas I think a lot of people kind of go, fuck it. Like you say, oh, I've just knocked that guy out with my knee. I may as well just carry on now. And it's like, well, no, like, okay, you made a mistake, but remedy it, and it's like, a leopard can change his spots, there's a lot of kind of cultural inference, I think, that lead people into this kind of powerlessness and about not being your own guru, religion in itself literally sets people up to be like, you can't have a relationship with God. You have to have your relationship with God through somebody that speaks to God. And it's like, what are you on about? We all speak to God. You can all speak to God, but so many people are so busy consuming and being distracted all the time that they can't hear God. God's talking to everybody all the time, or source or high power or whatever you want to call it. God's talking to everybody all the time. It's just that so many people aren't listening. It's just such a shame. That's negative. I like literally.
No, it's neither really, Joe. Like going back to that point, like I feel like there's much to be said. Like they talk about the middle way, and it's like, it sounds like when you're speaking about your journey, like it was like a pendulum, like you swung from one way to the other, like not sexually, but like, or maybe, I don't know, but like you swung from, like, say, being depressed to then being super positive to the point where it was toxic, and then you found yourself coming back to a medium, like a middle way of sorts, because it's like, you're right, yeah, like the toxic positivity thing, that's a real thing where you're not rooted in reality. You just think, yeah, everything's fine, and like your house is burning down, and you're like, no, everything's fine, don't worry. If I believe that it's not happening, then it doesn't happen. No, that's not work. Similar to the whole law of attraction, like people have a misconception that it's like, if you believe it and you will it, that it will happen. No, it has to be grounded in reality. It has to be grounded in action. And similar to that, like Joe, and something you said earlier as well, resonated with me. I had a similar experience, not necessarily at a rave, but after my chat with my sister, I went back to Ireland, and I was at a festival, or not a festival, but I was at like they call it Rag Week, which is like raise and give, and it's basically just 2 weeks of like Irish students who's getting drunk, and it was my first time ever taking MDMA, and I took it with like 2 or 3 of my friends and a few strangers, and basically they ended up getting in the car and going into town, but they had no room for me. But by this point, I'd already come up, and when people ask me what it's like who've never taken MDMA, I say it's like that scene out of Harry Potter where he drinks liquid luck and everything just goes right.
Yes.
Like you get these intuitive feelings that you're like, do you know what? I'm gonna go down to the pumpkin patch and it's gonna be all right. And you're like, you gotta do something about whatever you need to do, Harry. It's like, trust me, I got a good feeling. It was literally like that. They left. I was in a place I didn't know with people I didn't know. Like, objectively speaking, not ideal. But in my mind, internally, I was like, I'm gonna make it work. And I fucking did. I started walking in some random ass direction. I bumped into these 2 really lovely lads from up the country, and I was like, guys, I'm lost. Can you help me get into town? They're like, yeah, we're about to get a taxi. You want to come with us? I was like, absolutely. Get in a taxi, start getting to know them. We get to my destination. I'm like, oh, here, guys, this is money for the taxi. And they were like, don't worry about it, man. You're a sound fella. And I was like, sweet. Left, went to the club. I didn't know. Started making friends with loads of people. Had a great time. And then I ended up out in the smoking area. And there was this one particular individual that I saw that it was like a part of a group, but separate from the group. And I felt drawn to them, not like in a sexual way, like like that I was physically attracted to them or anything. Not that they aren't a physically attractive person. Like I still speak to them this day, so I don't want to offend them. But I felt drawn to them. I felt like I needed to have a conversation with them. And it was a girl, and I went over and I spoke to her. And as soon as I went over to her friends, like, who weren't really engaging with her, they were like, "Oh, she's got a boyfriend. Like, Joe, don't even bother." And I was like, listen, I ain't even here for that. Like, I just want to have a chat. Like, how mad is it that, like, the automatic, like, I know that is a common thing for, like, someone to approach like that, but I was like, I'm not even, that's not the level I'm on. Like, right now, I'm vibrating on a very elevated frequency. I just want to have a chat with this individual. And we started talking, and I could see she was quite reserved. And, like, bear in mind as well, I just had this conversation with my sister about, like, Joe, my mental health and stuff like that. So I was feeling like I had a new lease of life, like a new person. And I just started gushing. I started gushing to this girl, talking to her about this and how, like, I currently feel amazing, and then I'm working on it and all this, and just talking about how I used to be, how I used to feel, and then I was, like, depressed and feeling suicidal. And she started crying, and she said, "Wow, this is wild that you're talking to me about this, because 2 weeks previous to this moment, my sister actually committed suicide." And I was like, it just hit me like a shit ton of bricks. But then she started talking to me about it, and she was like, "I haven't felt comfortable talking about this with anyone. I've just been numb." She's like, "I didn't even cry at my sister's funeral. Like, and when they buried her, I couldn't believe it happened." And there she was, bawling her eyes out, talking to me, like hugging me, like this stranger that she did not know. And she was like, "Thank you so much for this. Like, I didn't realize I needed this, but I did." And I was crying as well. And I needed this too. And I just saw you, and I felt like I needed to talk to you. And it was this weird experience where I was just drawn in, like, whether it was like an electromagnetic field from her heart, or her mind, or her spirit. I don't know what it was, but we needed to have a chat that night. And yeah, it was absolutely amazing. And, like, Joe, I'm not saying drugs are the answer. Obviously not. Although with MDMA, there's been some mad positive research gone into it to help people with PTSD, like people coming back from war, rape survivors, stuff like that. So that truly is a medicine. But again, like, I hope people don't get it confused. I find psychedelics quite therapeutic, but it's because of how I use them. Like, all these things that we have at our disposal, they're just tools. Like, and MDMA, the reason why MDMA became a class 1 drug was because it was abused. It was a tool. Initially, it was used in therapeutic settings. Then some motherfucker spoiled a party for everyone and brought it into the party scene, and it was outlawed. It was banned. Up until that point, it was genuinely helping people because it was used in a clinical setting. But like anything, you can abuse water. You know, you can abuse water. You can die from drinking too much water. So it's like, how you use these things is important. You can either use them skillfully or abuse them. And unfortunately, a lot of people abuse these things. But I think there's a lot of medicine out there that's unfortunately outlawed, and I hope it'll be brought in. I didn't expect to be an advocate for psychedelic research, but here you are.
I am. No, I mean, I am. You know, I don't talk about it a huge amount with a lot of people, because a lot of people have got, you know, they've been brainwashed. But I mean, I've got complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is post-traumatic. Basically, it's an array of events that have caused post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's complex because it's many events on top of each other. So, and I've had that since the age of 4, going to where I am now, and you know, I've used various psychedelics and things like MDMA, and I honestly believe that they have saved my life. And I'm not like an advocate for it. I think if you're going to go and do these things, you need to do them in a setting with someone who knows that can support you. And because, you know, things like psychedelics, they can destroy you or they can heal you. They are the poison and the remedy, and it depends on how you turn up to something. That depends on how you get it. You know, it's set and setting, and it's like the way that you approach something is really important. But you know, these things, you know, shamans. I mean, I've worked with shamans before. I've worked with, witchcraft. I practice, you know, witchcraft. I've done all sorts of things in the past, and all of these things have led me to healing. You know, and if you respond with reverence and you come to them with love, and asking for help, then you'd be surprised. You would be surprised the help that turns up. You know, and I have been. You know, I've been destroyed a few times when I've come to something with a little bit like, fuck it kind of energy. And don't go into things with an fuck it energy when you're working with plant medicines and kind of spiritual healing, because you will have your ass handed to you by the
rude awakening. That's for sure.
Yeah, like, I've had a couple of times I'm like, fuck, I'm not doing that again. What did I do? You know, other times, like, I've had times when when it's just the most cathartic and loving and healing process that has literally, like, I think if I hadn't have discovered the opportunities to work with these medicines, that are outlawed drugs, but whatever, slavery was legal at one point. It doesn't make it moralistic.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
Like, Joe, laws don't necessarily conflate with morals. Just
yeah,
because something is a law doesn't not make it right. It's just
no.
it's
You know,
just a law.
have your own sovereignty over yourself
Mm.
and over your world. Just because something's legal, it doesn't mean it's safe. Just because something's legal, it doesn't mean it's moral, and vice versa. And I make my own decisions. And from being somebody who was literally suicidal, I've got like 200 scars on my body from self-harming, and like I that's not part of my life anymore. And I think if the route that I was going down was one that was, I would have killed myself. I would have killed myself, whether through, reckless driving. I used to drive drunk on drugs off my face, like on my bike, just like whatever, because I just didn't care. It was like, if I die today, I don't care, and
Mm.
that's, I mean, that's terrible. Like, I regret doing that because I could have harmed somebody else, but at the time I just didn't care, but these kind of situations that I've had where I've kind of had medicine and it's not always been like that. Some of it has been really reckless, and I told you about my ass handed to me. But
Yeah,
I've had experiences that have been so healing and so when you kind of see these kind of like typical stereo kind of like the Simpsons idea of what a spiritual event would be, where it's all kind of like
mm.
some shaman walking around like hi and like looking after you, and you're just like moving through spiritual realms, and like having all of that is experiences that you can have, and those experiences are so healing to the soul. And meeting your higher self. I've done shaman journeying, which is moving to different realms through your mind, and I've met my spirit animal. I've met like ancestors, like long held ancestors that have given me wisdom to bring back, all sorts of bizarre things that I can't explain. And yeah, you might just say, you're mad, or you're just hallucinating, or and it's all whatever. But I think when you go and you speak to an elder on another realm, and they give you something to bring back that is so profound that it's like you say, you're just a vessel. It's like, I don't feel like Laura is wise enough to have these thoughts, but the thing that I'm in connection with, I have the same thoughts. And interesting, you were saying about the pendulum theory. Like, this is literally what I say to my clients. It's like, you swing one way, you swing the other, because we're in a world of duality. The further you swing one way, the further you have to swing back. And then at some point you realize that both are extremities, and you need to come back to the center. But so many people that I speak to that are spiritually aligned and spiritually aware, we're all having the same thoughts. We're all having the same thoughts, with the same words, with the same awareness. We all speak of the same source, the same higher energy, the same higher intellect, which just makes me feel like we are all connecting to the same thing, that we're all talking to the same God, because it's all it's all the same thing. It's like, literally, like, I'm like, okay, I just got this message. What did your message say? No shit, it's the same thing. It's like, it's not Chinese whispers. It's like we are hearing the same thing, and it's like that in itself for me is enough evidence that I need, because when somebody says I channel from God, and we're both channeling the same thing, it's like and I haven't met this person from Adam. That's that. How much more like double blind scientific evidence like study could you do on spirituality?
I think if we focus more on that, like our shared interconnectedness, because right now, especially at like this in this current social climate, like, people are focused on how we're different and like what separates us. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, like, Joe, I haven't lost touch with like racism, sexism, and like nationality and all these different things. These are parts of us, but they're not all of us. And like, for me to look into another human's eyes, like, that's someone, me. That's me. I'm looking into myself there. And you mentioned about mirrors. previously. That's what I feel like it is. I feel like I'm interacting with individuals, but I'm like it's like looking at a mirror, you know, and that makes me empathize with them to a deeper level, because I recognize, like, Joe, this, I didn't choose any of this, like the skin color, where I'm from, how I sound, like my genital. None of this. I didn't choose any of this. This is what I'm working with. This is the hand I've been dealt. And don't get me wrong, I have some more opportunities and some more privileges than other individuals. But also the fact that where I am, like born in like a first world, well, Ireland's a second world country, but born in the West, like that in of itself is a privilege. You know what I mean? That we all benefit from. You know, like it takes to travel to understand how good you got it where you're from. When you go to places that are war torn or poverty stricken,
Yeah.
you understand how good you got it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like no matter who it is, whose eyes I'm looking into, like that's my brethren. You know what I mean? That's someone that is exactly like me. This person knows heartbreak. This person knows joy, happiness, sadness, loneliness. They've experienced all that I've experienced, just in a different body, in a different vessel, and that's what brings us closer together. And I remember this person. I was at a conference once, and he was teaching us this meditation, and it wasn't one where you sit in silence and you close your eyes. It was a meditation for when you walk into a room and you're surrounded by quote unquote strangers. He said, instead of labeling these people as strangers, label them, personalize them. Say that's someone's friend, that's someone's brother, that's someone's daughter, that's someone's sister, that's somebody's to someone, you know, and you're someone to someone. So the more you personalize these individuals, the less likely you are to think of them as other or not, like
Yeah.
strange or not me, because the more separation you create, that's where the ignorance and the hate comes from, because you think they are different to you, but they're not. We have so much more in common than we have different. But people like to dwell on their skin color or their sex or their sexual orientation or whatever, and they feel like people that aren't like them are wrong or they're lesser. But it's like, how can you put yourself on that pedestal when you're not responsible for any of this? You know, like this is so out of your control, like to the point where it humbles me, like the fact that like I even exist, that I came to into manifestation. Like think of all the little decisions that had to work out for us to exist. Like that alone, like and just looking up at the sky, looking up that there's a whole world out there. How can I stand on a pedestal and think that I am better than anyone else? And for that matter, lesser than anyone else. Like these judgments we put on ourselves that ultimately get put on others are not self-serving. They don't serve anyone, especially not ourselves, because when you think you're better than someone, eventually you're going to think that you're less than someone, you know. And these things comparison, they say, is the thief of joy, and I truly believe that. Like, because you may look at someone that you think is less than you and you may get a bit of satisfaction out of that, but it's fruitless, it's empty, because again, you look at someone else and you'll think they're better than you and it'll bring you down. So the only comparison you should be making is to the person you were yesterday. From day by day, hour by hour, are you better than you were before? Because it's like you're in your own lane, you know. You're only in competition with yourself, you're not in competition with anyone else. Don't get me wrong, there are, like, I say that in a metaphysical way. I know there's people that compete against other people, but in terms of just yeah, in a spiritual way, you're only competing against yourself, and even at that, like it should be you competing against yourself with compassion, like forgiving yourself, like being more caring and loving with yourself, and something you touched on there about like how people don't have enough self-esteem. Something that helped me with that is a meditation called the Metta Bhavana, is a Buddhist meditation, cultivation of loving kindness. And the first stage is bringing yourself to mind. There's four stages. So the first one is bringing yourself. Then you bring a friend or a family member that you love. Then a neutral person, and then someone you dislike or you hate. I think the first, third, and fourth stage are probably the most powerful, because the second stage, I feel like it's very easy to project love onto family, friends, pets. A lot of times we're more responsible and more loving towards people outside of ourselves than we are for ourselves. It's weird. We're kind of reckless with our lives. But the first stage and like the third stage, like a neutral person, that's where it comes into play with that meditation about strangers, about labeling them, like personalizing them, like rather than objectifying them or thinking that they're dehumanizing them. And in the last stage, like someone you dislike, you hate, that's a strong one, because if you have a lot of hate in your heart, you're going to struggle in that session. But again, the first and fourth, if you're struggling with one of them, you're probably struggling with the other, because if you have hate in your heart for others, you probably have some hate in your heart for yourself. And what I did, because it's very much, it's a visualization meditation, so it's up to you how you think of it. But the first stage I did, I'm still working with it with a while, but now I've gotten to a place where this is how I do it, and it's, I bring to mind my, like, me as a child, and I'm holding me as a baby, and I'm thinking, like, I'm wishing you well, I'm wishing you happy, I'm wishing you a life free from suffering, and I'm gonna look after you, and I'm gonna be the person you looked up to, like Joe, like a hero to you, and I'm gonna do you proud. You know what I mean? Because that child resembles my nature, represents my soul or my spirit, and I'm gonna guard that and keep that safe. And that's where my self love comes from. That's what I visualize when I do that meditation. And the first time I ever did that, Laura, I started crying in the Buddhist center. I was like, I was doing in silence with other people, and I could just feel myself crying and sobbing. And it was like, not in like a sad way, but it was just in like a powerful way. It shook me to my core, where I was just like, wow, I haven't ever done this. I haven't ever truly wished myself well, and wished and put love. I sent love back into myself. But yeah, it was fucking unbelievable.
It's a powerful place to end it, man. Like, oh, it's been
Yeah,
an absolute pleasure talking to you. You're gonna have to come back
yeah,
on because we could talk for days.
yeah. We'll do it again soon.
I know, but
No, man,
thank you so much for coming on. Like,
no matter.
you're the beginning of the interviews. So, and I think that anybody that follows you has got a hell of a bar to follow. I think, blimey, absolute pleasure to have you on. I've been loving talking to you.
Thank you, Laura. I am grateful to you, for you, and for life.
Yeah.
So
Same.
thank
Okay,
you
man.
very much. Always good talking to you.
Absolutely, always,
Speak
always.
to you soon.
Okay.